Part 1: The Mirror Ceremony. Every mirror in every pack hall lit up at the same time. That was the old rule. When a Luna was to be honored, or stripped, the moon mirrors carried it to every corner of the kingdom so that no wolf could claim ignorance. Tonight, every wolf in every territory saw the same thing. The black-silver throne of Ashenmore sat on its raised dais at the center of the great hall, and on it sat King Kaelan Ashworth, his dark hair swept back from a face so beautiful it had once made poets weep and soldiers kneel. His jaw was sharp, his cheekbones were carved, his silver-gray eyes caught the light of the ceremonial torches like polished blades. He was the most powerful alpha king the realm had seen in 3 generations. And he looked bored, not angry, not grieving, not even satisfied, bored. Beside him stood a woman with dark auburn hair, wearing a crescent moon crown that did not belong to her. Her name was Seraphina Voss. She was beautiful, high cheekbones, full lips, a body draped in wine-red silk that pooled at her feet like spilled blood. She smiled at the lit mirrors the way a cat smiled at a cornered bird. She believed she had won. Below the dais, held at both wrists by armored guards, stood the true Luna of Ashenmore, Aurelia. Her golden hair fell past her hips in a river of light even the torchfire could not dim. Her gown, pale ivory, one shoulder bare, the fabric flowing like water over her waist, was torn at the hem where the guards had dragged her forward too roughly. A thin silver chain connected her wrists. Not iron, silver, because even Kaelan would not put iron on a Luna's skin. That was the kind of cruelty he preferred, the kind that still looked beautiful. Every pack mirror showed her face, her wide, sea-green eyes, her parted lips, the single tear track drying on her left cheek, one she had not wiped because her hands were chained. The great hall was full. Lords, betas, omegas, servants, soldiers, all standing in silence, all watching. Kaelan lifted one hand. The hall went quieter. "Bring the ring forward," he said. A steward approached Aurelia with a velvet tray. On it sat her moon ring, a band of woven silver and moonstone that had been placed on her finger the night of their mating ceremony, 3 years ago, in this very hall, under a full moon that had burned so bright the wolves in the courtyard had howled for an hour. She remembered that night. She remembered the way Kaelan had looked at her, really looked, like she was the only living thing in a world of stone and shadow. She remembered thinking, "He sees me." Now standing before him in chains, she understood. He had seen her. He had loved her. And then something inside him had curdled, slowly, quietly, like milk left too long in the sun, until the love became something else entirely. He did not love Seraphina. Aurelia knew that with the certainty of a woman who had spent 3 years reading his silences, his moods, the way his pupils dilated when he was truly engaged, and the way they went flat when he was performing. He looked at Seraphina the way he looked at a new sword, admiring the polish, bored by the weight. No, Seraphina was not a replacement. She was a tool. Kaelan had placed her at the high table, draped her in the moon crown, let her sit in Aurelia's chair, not because he wanted Seraphina, but because he wanted to see what Aurelia would do. He wanted to see her crack. He wanted to see the composed, graceful, endlessly dignified Luna of Ashenmore finally lose her composure, finally scream, finally claw, finally show him the raw and bleeding thing underneath all that golden poise. Because somewhere along the way, between the 100th kneeling lord and the 1000th won battle, Kaelan had stopped being able to feel anything at all. Except when he hurt her. When he hurt her, he felt alive. That was the sickness no healer could name and no moon could cure. "The Luna of Ashenmore," Kaelan said, his voice carrying to every lit mirror in the kingdom, "has failed in her duties to the crown, to the pack, and to her king." A murmur rippled through the hall. Aurelia's hands trembled in the silver chains. Not from fear, from rage. She had not failed. She had run the winter grain supply when his war council forgot. She had walked the sick wards during the frost plague when every beta refused. She had held the eastern border packs together with letters and visits and personal promises when Kaelan's tax collectors bled them dry. She had done everything a Luna was supposed to do and more. But she had done it quietly, gracefully, without complaint. And that, she realized now, was the problem. He didn't want a Luna who handled things. He wanted a Luna who broke. "Remove the ring," Kaelan said. The steward reached for her hand. Aurelia looked up at the dais, past Seraphina, past the guards, past the lords. She looked at Kaelan. His silver eyes were fixed on her with an intensity that had nothing to do with justice or ceremony. She recognized that look. It was hunger. Not for her body. Not even for her pain, exactly. For her reaction. For the proof that she still cared enough to suffer. "Let them see," he said, quieter now, almost intimate, as if the hundreds of wolves and thousands of lit mirrors didn't exist. "What happens to a Luna who forgets her place?" Aurelia stared at him for 3 full heartbeats. Then she did something no one in the hall expected. She opened her mouth and spoke his wolf's true name. Not Kalen. Not King. Not Alpha. The name underneath. The secret syllable that only a true mate, bonded under moonfire, could know. The sound that lived in the marrow of his wolf's soul. Older than language, older than crowns. She spoke it clearly, without shouting, without Luna voice, without power. Just the name. And Kalen's wolf responded. His body jerked. His spine curved. His hands gripped the armrests of the black silver throne so hard the metal groaned. His head, that proud, cruel, beautiful head, dropped forward, and from his chest came a sound that every wolf in the hall recognized instantly. A whimper. Low. Broken. Involuntary. The sound a wolf made when its true mate called, and the bond was still alive, still burning, still tethered to something the crown could not cut. Every mirror in the kingdom carried that sound. Every pack heard it. The Alpha King of Ashenmoor, the most powerful wolf in 3 generations, whimpering like a pup on his own throne, his wolf bowing to the woman he had just tried to strip. The hall went dead silent. Seraphina's smile vanished. Aurelia looked at him. At the way his shoulders shook. At the way his wolf clawed at his ribs from inside, desperate to crawl to her, to press its muzzle to her ankle, to submit. She had never used this. In 3 years of marriage, she had never once weaponized the bond. She had kept that name sacred. Private. A thing whispered in the dark after nightmares when Kalen, the real Kalen, the one beneath the crown, had buried his face in her hair and breathed like a man drowning. She had protected that name the way she had protected him. And he had repaid her with chains and a ceremony. Her voice came out cold and steady. "Your wolf remembers. It seems the one who forgot his place is not the Luna. It is the crown." The silence in the hall was absolute. Then Aurelia turned to the steward, who was still holding the velvet tray with the moon ring. "Give it to me," she said. The steward looked at Kalen. Kalen was still hunched, his wolf still fighting him, his breath ragged. He could not speak. The steward, hands trembling, held out the tray. Aurelia took the ring. She did not throw it. She placed it on the stone floor, carefully, the way she had once placed flowers on the altar the night of their mating. Then she stepped on it. Her heel came down on the moonstone center, and the ring, 3 years of oath of bond, of sleepless nights and whispered promises, cracked like thin ice. Silver light exploded outward in a ring. The blast was not physical. It was spiritual. Every wolf in the hall staggered. The great mirror behind the throne, the one that had witnessed their bonding, their coronation, their first dance as king and Luna, went dark on one side, its surface splitting with a single jagged fracture line. Half the royal mirror. Gone. The symbolism was so clear that even the least educated Omega in the back row understood. The Luna had broken the bond herself. Not rejected. Not begged. Broken. Kalen finally raised his head. His wolf was still whimpering, but his human eyes, those silver-gray eyes that could command armies, were fixed on Aurelia with an expression that made several lords step back involuntarily. It was not rage. It was fascination. Wild, burning, almost reverent fascination, the kind a wolf showed when prey it thought was tame suddenly turned and bit. He looked more alive than he had in months. Seraphina reached for his arm. "My king." He did not even glance at her. Aurelia unclasped the silver chain at her wrists. The steward had not locked it properly. It was ceremonial, not functional, because Kalen had assumed she would stand there and take it. She let the chain fall. She pulled her cloak from the hook by the door, the same dove-gray cloak she had worn on her first day in this castle, when she had arrived as a 19-year-old bride full of hope and moonlight. She draped it over her bare shoulder. She walked toward the great doors. No one stopped her, not because they were on her side, though some were, but because the mirror blast had sent a ripple through every wolf's instincts, and every wolf in that hall could feel, deep in its bones, that the woman walking away was carrying the moon's favor with her. The doors opened. Beyond them, the night was dark. Not dim. Not cloudy. Dark. The moon, which had been full and bright an hour ago, was gone. Aurelia walked into the moonless dark, into the black tree line of the old forest, and she did not look back. Behind her, the great hall erupted. Lords shouting. Betas arguing. Seraphina screaming questions no one answered. And Kaelin, King Kaelin Ashworth, Alpha of Ashimor, the most dangerous wolf in the kingdom, sat on his cracked throne, in his half-dark hall, with his wolf howling inside his chest, and smiled. Not a kind smile. A hungry one. Part 2, The Black Forest. Aurelia made it a quarter-mile past the tree line before her legs gave out. She caught herself on a moss-covered boulder, her palms scraping against the stone, and she knelt there in the dark, the absolute, impossible dark, because the moon was gone. She had taken it with her somehow, and she didn't even know how, and she pressed her forehead to the cold rock and tried to breathe. She did not cry yet. She would. She knew she would. But not yet. Not while she could still hear the distant shouts from the castle. Not while she could still smell the torch fire on the wind. She made herself stand. She made herself walk. The forest closed around her like a mouth. The trees here were old, older than the castle, older than the kingdom, older than the moon oaths. Their trunks were black and wide as siege towers, their canopy so thick that even on a moonlit night, the forest floor would have been dim. Tonight, with no moon at all, it was blind dark. Aurelia walked by instinct, by smell, by the way the air felt different near water, thinner near clearings, heavier near stone. She walked for an hour, maybe 2. Her slippers, pretty ceremonial, useless, tore on a root. She kicked them off and walked barefoot, feeling the frozen earth bite at her soles. When she finally stopped, it was because she smelled something she did not recognize. Not wolf, not deer, not bear, something older. She turned slowly. 2 eyes stared back at her from the dark. They were silver-white, luminous, calm, set in a face she could only see in fragments, a long, elegant muzzle, a sweep of antlers that branched like winter lightning, a body that seemed to be made of mist and moonlight even though there was no moon. It was a stag, but not any stag. It was enormous, taller at the shoulder than any horse she had ever seen. Its fur was pure silver, shimmering faintly as if lit from within. Its antlers, 12 points, each one glowing at the tip like a captured star, rose above the canopy and seemed to hold up the sky. An ancient moon stag. Aurelia had heard the stories. Every pup heard them. The moon stags were the moon goddess's own creatures, older than wolves, older than oaths. They appeared only to those the moon had not abandoned, or to those the moon intended to test. The stag regarded her with patient, fathomless eyes. Then it leaned down and nuzzled her torn cloak. And Aurelia, who had held herself together through the chains, the ceremony, the Luna voice, the cracking ring, the mile-long walk through blind dark, finally broke. She wrapped her arms around the stag's thick, warm neck, pressed her face into its silver fur, and cried. Not delicately, not gracefully. She cried the way a woman cries when she has loved someone completely and been used for sport. When she has given her name, her body, her instincts, her howl to a man who turned her devotion into entertainment. She cried until her shoulders stopped shaking, until the stag's fur was wet, until her throat was raw and her eyes burned, and she had nothing left. The stag stood perfectly still through all of it, its breathing slow and warm against her back, its antlers glowing softly above her like a crown she had not asked for. When she finally pulled back, wiping her face with the heel of her hand, the stag dipped its head and pulled a cluster of frost berries from a nearby bush. It ate 3. Then it dropped one in her lap, delicately like a gift. Aurelia stared at the berry. She almost laughed. Is this your version of comfort? She asked, her voice wrecked. The stag blinked at her, ate another berry, dropped another in her lap. Generous, she said flatly. She ate the berry. It was sweet and cold and tasted like the first snow of winter, the kind of snow that falls before dawn, before anyone is awake, when the world is still quiet and clean. She sat there, leaning against the ancient moon stag, eating frost berries in the blind dark, in a forest she did not know, with no pack, no crown, no mate, no moon, and no shoes. She did not know it yet, but someone was watching. In the shadow of a granite outcrop, 60 yards uphill, a man stood motionless. He was tall, taller than Kaelin by 2 inches, broader by 1, built like a man who had survived not on inherited power, but on physical dominance, endurance, and an absolute refusal to be anything other than the most dangerous thing in any given clearing. His name was Kael Thornwood, and he was the Wolf King of the Wilds. He did not use the title Alpha King. He did not use Alpha at all. The wild packs, the border wolves, the mountain wolves, the storm ridge runners, and the frost hunters, did not follow the old royal hierarchy. They followed the wolf who could lead, fight, hunt, and hold the line against everything the civilized packs feared. Kale had held that line for 11 years, since he killed his predecessor in single combat at the age of 19. He was 30 now. His dark hair was long enough to tie back, but never was. It fell around a face that was not pretty the way Kalen's was pretty. Kalen's beauty was marble. Carved. Royal. The kind of face that belonged on coins. Kale's beauty was different. It was the beauty of high ridgelines and thunderheads and wolves running flat out across open ground. Strong jaw, sharp cheekbones, a nose that had been broken once and healed slightly crooked, a mouth that rarely smiled but devastated when it did. His eyes were a deep, dark amber, wolf eyes, some said, even in human form. He wore no crown, no jewels. His clothing was dark leather, scarred and travel-worn, his boots caked with forest mud. A longsword hung at his hip, plain, functional, sharp enough to split a hair. He had come into the old forest tonight because his scouts had reported something that should have been impossible. The moon had vanished. Not behind clouds. Vanished. And the ancient moon stag, the one his grandmother had called a myth, had been sighted moving south through the deep woods for the first time in living memory. He had come to see the stag. Instead, he had found a woman. He watched her. He watched her kneeling in the dark, barefoot, in a torn gown, wrapping her arms around the neck of a creature that had not allowed a living soul to touch it in 1,000 years. He watched her cry. Not the performative tears he had seen from court wolves who visited the border, elegant dabs with silk handkerchiefs, designed to inspire sympathy and extract favors. These were real tears. Ugly, gasping, shoulder-wrecking tears, the kind that came from a place so deep the body could not contain them. He watched her stop crying, wipe her face roughly, and eat a berry the stag dropped in her lap. He watched her almost laugh. And he watched her, 5 minutes later, stand up on bleeding feet, pull her torn cloak tight, set her jaw, and say to the stag, "All right, where do I go now?" The stag turned its great head north and began to walk. Aurelia followed. She was limping. Her feet were cut. Her cloak was soaked with tears and stag fur. She looked like a shipwreck. She also looked, Kale noticed, like someone who had absolutely no intention of stopping. He said nothing. He followed at a distance, moving through the trees with a silence that came from decades of hunting in forests far thicker and more dangerous than this one. He would watch a little longer before deciding what to do. Part 3, the first trial. The stag led Aurelia north through the forest for the rest of the night. She did not sleep. She could not have slept even if the stag had stopped, because every time she closed her eyes she saw Kalen's face, not the cruel mask he wore on the throne, but the real face, the one she had seen on their wedding night, when he had cupped her cheek and said, in a voice rough with emotion, "I have waited my whole life for you." He had meant it. That was the part that made it unbearable. He had meant it then. He had loved her then. And the love had rotted. Not because of Serafina. Serafina was nothing. Serafina was a prop. It had rotted because Kalen had sat on that throne year after year, absorbing power and obedience and fear, until the only sensation strong enough to penetrate the numbness was the sight of Aurelia in pain. She was not a wife to him anymore. She was a nerve, the only nerve he had left. Dawn came gray and cold. The forest thinned. The ground tilted upward, and the air changed, sharper, thinner, tinged with frost. The stag stopped at the base of an ice cliff. It was not a mountain. It was a sheer wall of black rock coated in thick, ancient ice, 100 feet high, stretching across the forest floor like a frozen wave caught mid-crash. The ice was blue-white and translucent, and deep inside it, Aurelia could see shapes, bones, branches, the fossilized impression of enormous paw prints. The stag looked at her. Then it looked at the cliff. Then it lay down at the base, tucked its long legs underneath itself, and began grooming its shoulder, utterly unconcerned. Aurelia stared at it. "You want me to climb that?" she said. The stag licked its shoulder. With no rope. No claws. No shoes. The stag found a tick, or pretended to find a tick, and bit at it delicately. "You are the least helpful divine creature I have ever met," Aurelia said. The stag ignored her. She looked at the cliff. It was impossible. The ice was smooth, the handholds invisible, the rock beneath slick with centuries of frozen melt. A trained climber with proper gear would have struggled. A barefoot woman in a torn gown had no chance. But the stag had led her here. And the stag was the moon's creature. And the moon had vanished when she left the castle, which meant she was starting to understand that the moon was waiting for something. For her. Not for Kalen. Not for Seraphina. Not for any king. For her. She touched the ice. It burned. Her fingers went white, then red, then numb. She climbed. She climbed because there was nothing else to do. She climbed because going back meant going back to Kalen, and going sideways meant wandering the forest until she starved, and standing still meant admitting that he had finally broken her. She climbed with her fingertips and her bare toes, and her teeth gritted so hard her jaw ached. She slipped 6 times. She caught herself 5. The 6th time, she fell 8 feet and landed on a ledge so narrow her heels hung over the edge. She lay there, gasping, bleeding from both hands and one knee, staring up at the gray sky. She almost quit. Then she smelled something. Faint. Distant. Carried on the wind from the top of the cliff. Moonflower. The scent that had filled the great hall on her wedding night. The scent that meant the moon was near, was watching, was present. She stood up. She climbed. From below, the stag watched her with calm, luminous eyes. It had stopped pretending to groom. It was simply watching, the way a teacher watches a student during an exam. Not helping, not hindering, just noting what kind of creature this golden-haired woman really was. From the tree line, 60 yards east, Cale Thornwood watched too. His arms were crossed. His jaw was tight. He had almost intervened when she fell. His body had moved forward 3 steps before he caught himself. He did not know this woman. He did not know why the ancient moon stag had chosen her. He did not know whether she was worthy of help or a political trap from the Ashenmore court. But watching her climb that cliff, barefoot, bleeding, in a ceremony gown, with no one cheering for her and no one catching her, he felt something shift in his chest that he had no name for. She reached the top. She pulled herself over the edge, rolled onto her back, and lay there in the frost, chest heaving, hands torn, staring at the blank sky where the moon should have been. The moonflower scent was everywhere up here. The top of the cliff was covered in tiny white flowers that should not have been blooming in winter. They grew in clusters between the rocks, their petals open and trembling, as if waiting. Aurelia sat up. She looked at the flowers. Something inside her, deep, instinctual, older than thought, told her what to do. She closed her eyes and breathed in. Not just air. Scent. She breathed in the moonflower and the frost and the ancient stone and the far-off smell of pine smoke and snow melt and, there, underneath everything, the faintest trace of pack. Of wolves. Of territory. Of wild, unchained, unbroken wolves running somewhere to the north. Her wolf stirred. Not the domesticated, court-trained wolf she had learned to present at Ashenmore. The one that sat nicely and howled on command at ceremonies and never, ever challenged the Alpha King. Her real wolf. The one she had buried so deep under politeness and protocol and love for Kalen that she had almost forgotten it existed. It opened one eye inside her chest and sniffed the air. And for the first time in 3 years, Aurelia's sense of smell, her true lunigrade moon-given sense of smell, came roaring back to life. She could smell everything. The stag at the base of the cliff. The frost on the flowers. The heartbeat of a rabbit 50 yards away. The mineral tang of iron in the rock. The old blood in the fossilized bones inside the ice. And faint, steady, close enough to make her head turn sharply, the scent of a man. Not Kalen. Someone else. Leather. Steel. Pine smoke. Wolf. She turned toward the tree line, eyes narrowed. Cale stepped out of the shadows. He stood at the edge of the cliff top, 20 feet from her, his dark hair moving in the wind, his amber eyes steady. His longsword hung at his hip. His expression was unreadable. He did not look surprised to see her looking at him. He looked, if anything, slightly annoyed that she had detected him at all. "How long have you been watching?" Aurelia asked. Her voice was raw. Her hands were bleeding. She was kneeling in moonflower in a torn gown with no shoes. She did not look like a queen. She looked like a woman who had climbed an impossible cliff to prove something to herself, and she had proven it, and now she was daring anyone in the world to have a problem with it. Cale tilted his head. "Long enough," he said. His voice was deep. Rough. Like something that had been weathered by wind and cold and years of speaking only when necessary. "Long enough to help," Aurelia said flatly. "And you didn't. You didn't need help. I fell. You caught yourself. Once I didn't. Once you found a ledge. That's not the same as catching myself. The cliff disagrees. You're here. Aurelia stared at him. He stared back. Neither of them blinked. Below them, the ancient moon stag made a sound that, in a less divine creature, might have been a snort. "Who are you?" Aurelia asked. "Cale Thornwood." The name hit her like cold water. Every wolf in the kingdom knew that name. The Wolf King of the Wilds. The man who held the northern borders with nothing but wild packs and brute force. The man who had refused every summons from the Ashenmoor court. The man Calen called the dog who thinks he's a king, and privately feared more than any foreign army. She had expected someone older. Rougher. Less, she didn't have a word for it. Less like that. "The Wolf King," she said. "Some call me that. What do you call yourself?" "Cale. Just Cale. It's worked for 30 years. She looked at him, really looked, and saw the details her adrenaline had initially missed. The faint scars on his hands. The way he stood perfectly balanced, weight-centered, ready to move in any direction. The calm in his eyes that was not performance or apathy, but the genuine, bone-deep steadiness of a man who knew exactly what he could do and never needed to prove it. He was, she realized with a clarity that annoyed her, the most handsome man she had ever seen. Not pretty, the way Calen was pretty. Not polished. Not arranged. Handsome the way mountains were handsome, carved by weather, sharpened by time, beautiful because the force that made them did not care about beauty and produced it anyway. She filed this observation under irrelevant and stood up, wincing as her torn feet took her weight. "Why are you here?" she asked. The moon vanished. The stag moved. "I followed." "You followed the stag?" "Yes. Not me. I didn't know you existed until 3 hours ago. And now that you do?" He looked at her for a long moment. His amber eyes moved over her face, not her body, her face, cataloging something she could not read. "Now," he said, "I'm deciding." "Deciding what?" "Whether you're a problem from Ashenmoor or a solution to one." "I'm neither. I'm a woman with no shoes standing on a cliff." The corner of his mouth moved. Not quite a smile. The ghost of one. "I noticed the shoes," he said. "Did you also notice the divine stag that led me here and then took a nap?" "I noticed that too." "Any thoughts?" "The stag has good instincts." Aurelia raised an eyebrow. "Instincts about what?" Cale did not answer. He unclasped his outer cloak, heavy dark wool, lined with fur, and held it out to her. "Your feet are bleeding," he said. "There's a camp 2 miles north. You can walk or I can carry you." "You can carry me?" "I can. I climbed this cliff alone." "I know. That's why I'm offering, not insisting." She looked at the cloak. At him. At the stag, which was now standing at the base of the cliff, looking up at both of them with an expression of serene patience. She took the cloak. She wrapped it around her shoulders. It smelled like pine smoke and leather and wolf, and it was warm. So warm she nearly cried again, not from sadness but from the simple, devastating relief of being warm after a night of cold. "I'll walk," she said. "Good," Cale said. "The path is rough. Try not to fall. I might not catch you. You just said you would carry me." "I said I could. Not that I would." Aurelia stared at him. He stared back. Below them, the stag made the snorting sound again and began walking north. They followed. Part 4, The Wolf Den. The camp was not what Aurelia expected. She had imagined a military outpost, tents, flags, the organized clatter of a border garrison. What she found was a settlement built into the bones of the mountain itself. Stone shelters dug into the hillside, roofed with timber and packed earth, connected by paths worn smooth by decades of boots and paws. Smoke rose from cook fires. The smell of roasting elk and herb bread filled the cold air. Wild wolves moved everywhere, not in human form, not always. Some trotted through the camp on 4 legs, pausing to sniff at cooked pots or nudge children. Others sat on ledges in human form, sharpening weapons, mending leather, talking in low voices. There were no servants, no ceremonies, no mirrors. Everyone turned to look at Aurelia. The golden hair, the ceremonial gown, the bare feet, the bloodied hands, the cloak that clearly belonged to their wolf king draped over her shoulders. She could read their faces, suspicion, curiosity, hostility. A woman stepped forward. She was tall, broad-shouldered, with short-cropped black hair and a scar that ran from her left temple to her jaw. Her eyes were wolf yellow, and she wore a hunting vest over a gray tunic, a short sword on each hip. "Cale," the woman said, her voice flat and careful. "You brought a royal." "I brought a guest, Bryn," Cale said. "She smells like the Ashenmoor throne room." She smells like a woman who just climbed the ice cliff barefoot. Give her boots and food. Bryn looked at Aurelia with open distrust. She's the Luna. Aurelia said quietly. I was the Luna. We don't bow to Lunas here, Bryn said. I'm not asking anyone to bow. I'm asking for boots. Mine are in a forest somewhere, and they were useless anyway. Bryn blinked. Looked at Kale. Kale's expression had not changed, but something in his stance, a slight easing of weight, suggested he was entertained. Get her boots, Kale said. The lined ones. Bryn turned and walked away without another word. A young man appeared at Kale's side, shorter, leaner, with the same dark hair and amber eyes, but a face that was all mischief where Kale's was all restraint. He grinned at Aurelia with the cheerful audacity of someone who had never once been afraid of consequences. You're the Luna who cracked the king's mirror, he said. And you are? Ronan, Kale's brother. The charming one. Is that self-assessed? Universally acknowledged. By whom? Me. Repeatedly. Kale put a hand on Ronan's shoulder and physically moved him aside. Go check the eastern perimeter. I checked it an hour ago. Check it again. You just want me to stop talking to the pretty royal. I want you to stop talking. Ronan grinned wider, bowed theatrically to Aurelia, and jogged off into the trees, tossing a look over his shoulder that clearly said, I'll be back, and you can't stop me. Aurelia watched him go. He's a problem, Kale finished. Yes. I was going to say funny. That's the problem. He led her to one of the stone shelters. Inside it was simple, a cot, a table, a basin of water, a fire burning in a stone hearth. He set bread and dried meat on the table, and a pot of herb tea over the flame. Rest, he said. The stag will move when it's ready. Until then, you're safe here. Safe from what? Kale paused at the door. Ashimor is 3 days south. Your ex-king will have sent riders by dawn. The word ex-king landed in her chest like a stone. He'll come himself, she said quietly. Kale looked at her. Why? Because he's not finished with me. Because breaking me in private isn't enough anymore. He needs an audience. Because I finally bit back, and now he's more obsessed than he's been in a year. She didn't say any of that. Because he always does, she said. Kale studied her for a moment. Then he nodded once and left. She sat on the cot. She ate the bread. She drank the tea. She stared at the fire. The ancient moon stag appeared at the shelter entrance, too tall to fit inside, and stuck its enormous head through the doorway. One antler knocked against the stone lintel with a resonant thud. The stag did not care. It reached its long neck into the shelter and gently stole the remaining piece of bread from the table. Aurelia watched it chew. That was mine, she said. The stag chewed. You have an entire forest of berries. Chew. You are a divine messenger of the moon goddess, and you are stealing bread. The stag finished the bread, licked its lips, and withdrew its head from the shelter. Its antlers knocked against the lintel again on the way out. It did not care about that either. From outside, she heard Ronan's voice. The holy stag just ate my brother's bread supply. Should I tell him, or? Tell him, Bryn's voice said, and then run. Part 5, The Wolf Den Trial. Aurelia slept 4 hours. When she woke, the fire was low, and the lined boots Bryn had promised were sitting by the cot. They fit. She pulled them on, laced them tight, and stepped outside. The camp was quieter now. Late afternoon. The wild wolves had settled into the rhythms of dusk. Patrol rotations, cook fires, pups playing in the clearing. She saw Kale across the camp, speaking to a group of older wolves who looked like pack elders. His back was to her, but she noticed the way the elders leaned in when he spoke, the way they nodded not from obligation but from genuine respect. He was not like Kalen. Kalen commanded because the crown told him he could. Kale led because every wolf in his territory had, at some point, watched him do something worth following. The stag appeared beside her, materializing from the tree line like mist taking shape. It nudged her shoulder with its muzzle and began walking east, toward the thicker trees. Aurelia hesitated. The stag stopped, turned its great head, looked at her with those silver-white eyes. The message was clear: we are not done. She followed. The stag led her downhill, through old-growth pines, past frozen streams, into a part of the forest that smelled different, muskier, wilder, layered with the scent of dozens of wolves. A wolf den. She could see the entrance, a wide, dark opening in a hillside, ringed with packed earth and claw marks. From inside, she could hear the soft sounds of pups, whimpering, snuffling, the tiny growls of young wolves play fighting. And she could hear something else. A deeper whimper. An adult wolf, female in pain. Aurelia moved toward the den entrance. A gray wolf appeared in the opening, a big female, ears flat, teeth bared, hackles up. A guard. The wolf snarled a warning. Do not come closer. Aurelia stopped. She could smell it now, blood, infection, the sour tang of a wound gone bad. One of the den mothers was hurt. Badly. The pups were distressed, pressing against the injured wolf, licking at something they couldn't fix. Aurelia knelt. She did not make herself small. That would have read as submission, and a guard wolf would not respect submission from a stranger. Instead, she knelt to put herself at eye level with the gray wolf and held out her hand, palm up, fingers still. The gray wolf's snarl faded to a low, uncertain growl. Aurelia spoke softly, not in Luna voice, just her voice, gentle and clear. I can smell her wound. It's infected. If it's not cleaned, she'll lose the leg, and your pups will lose their mother. Let me help. The gray wolf stared at her, sniffed her hand, sniffed her wrist, where the scent of the broken moon bond still lingered like perfume. Then, slowly, the wolf stepped aside. Inside the den, a brown and silver female wolf lay on her side, panting. Her left foreleg was gashed deep, jagged, probably from a territorial fight, and the wound had gone hot with infection. Two pups, barely 6 weeks old, pressed against her belly, making soft sounds of distress. Aurelia went to work. She was not a healer by training, but she had spent 3 years running Ashenmoor's sick wards during plague season, and she knew infection. She knew herbs. She knew pressure and warmth, and how to clean a wound without making it worse. She used water from a nearby stream, cold and clean. She used yarrow from the forest floor, crushing it between stones to make a rough poultice. She worked carefully, steadily, murmuring to the injured wolf the way she had once murmured to plague-sick omegas in the castle infirmary. The wolf whimpered, but did not snap. The pups crawled over Aurelia's lap, licking her hands, tangling in her hair. By the time she finished, the wound was clean, packed with yarrow, and bound with a strip torn from the lining of her cloak. The brown and silver wolf lifted her head and licked Aurelia's wrist, the same wrist where the moon bond scent lingered. The gray guard wolf sat at the den entrance and said nothing, which, for a wolf, was the highest compliment. When Aurelia emerged from the den, dirty, exhausted, covered in pup drool and yarrow paste, she found Bryn standing 10 feet away, arms crossed, expression unreadable. You went into a wild wolf den, Bryn said. Yes. Alone. The stag was here. The stag was eating berries 50 yards away. Aurelia glanced at the stag, which was indeed eating berries 50 yards away, its antlers bobbing gently as it chewed. You could have been killed, Bryn said. The pups needed help. That's not a good reason. It's the only reason I need. Bryn stared at her for a long time. Then she uncrossed her arms and pulled something from her belt, a small, carved bone pendant on a leather cord. She held it out. Ivira made this, Bryn said. My little sister. She carves them for people she thinks are brave. I haven't met your sister. She was watching from the ridge. She saw you go in. Aurelia took the pendant. The carving was rough but clear. A tiny wolf, head thrown back in a howl. Tell her thank you, Aurelia said. Tell her yourself. She'll be at dinner. She's 10, and she won't stop talking, and she'll want to know everything about the royal court. Lie to her and say it's glamorous. Aurelia almost smiled. Parts of it were. Parts of anything are, Bryn said. Then quieter. The den mother's pups would have died without her. Wolves don't forget that kind of thing. She turned and walked away. Aurelia looked down at the pendant. Her eyes stung, but she did not cry. She had done enough crying. Instead, she looped the cord around her neck and tucked the pendant inside her gown. Part 6, Fire and Wind. Dinner that night was around a massive central fire in the camp's main clearing. There were no long tables, no high seats, no hierarchy of placement. Wolves sat where they pleased, on logs, on rocks, on the ground. Meat roasted on spits. Her bread was torn and shared. Someone played a bone flute, badly, and someone else threw a boot at him, and the flute stopped. Aurelia sat between Ronan and a 10-year-old girl with enormous brown eyes and a gap-toothed grin who was unmistakably Bryn's sister Ivira. Is it true, Ivira said, leaning so close Aurelia could count her freckles, that the royal castle has mirrors that can see into other packs? Yes. Is it true the queen, the old queen, the fake one, wears a crown made of real moonstone? It's not real moonstone. It's silver plate. Ivira gasped with delight. I knew it. Bryn said it looked cheap. Bryn has seen the crown? No. Bryn says everything royal looks cheap. She says the only real crown is teeth marks. Ivira paused. I don't think that's true. It's a little true, Aurelia said. Ronan leaned over from her other side. Quick question, and I ask this with genuine academic interest. Did the king's wolf actually whimper? Aurelia looked at him. Every mirror in the kingdom showed it, she said. I know. I watched. I just want to hear you say it, because my brother has been pretending he's not interested for 2 days, and I want to see if mentioning it makes him react. Aurelia glanced across the fire. Kale sat on a flat boulder, a plate of food untouched beside him, his amber eyes watching the clearing with the calm attention of a man who was always watching. He did not appear to be listening. His wolf whimpered, Aurelia said, a little louder than necessary. Kale's jaw tightened. Barely. If she hadn't been looking, she would have missed it. Ronan grinned. There it is. There is nothing, Kale said without looking at them. Your jaw moved. I was chewing. You haven't touched your food. I was chewing air. That's not a thing. It is now. Ivira tugged Aurelia's sleeve. Are they always like this? I've known them for 12 hours, Aurelia said, and I believe the answer is yes. The fire crackled. Ivira started asking about the crown again. Ronan launched into an elaborate and largely fabricated story about the time Kale fought a bear and won by talking it into submission. Bryn threw a pine cone at Ronan's head and missed. The bone flute started again, slightly less badly. Aurelia sat in the warmth and the noise and the chaos, and for the first time in 3 years, she felt something she had forgotten existed. Not safety exactly. Belonging. Like sitting in a room where no one was performing, where no one was measuring her, where no one was watching to see if she would crack. Later, when the feast thinned and only Kale, Ronan, Bryn, Ivira, and Aurelia remained near the supply shelter, a silver-white muzzle slid out of the dark and stole the folded heel of bread from Kale's hand. Kale looked down at his empty fingers. Then he looked into the trees. That, he said very calmly, is the second time today. The ancient moon stag stayed half hidden behind the pines, antlers dimmed, body swallowed by shadow. It did not step into the public firelight. It did not parade through camp like a tame pet. It merely chewed with the serene confidence of a sacred creature that had decided bread was a private matter between itself and the offended owner. Ronan leaned toward Aurelia. For legal reasons, I saw nothing. You saw a divine theft, Bryn said. A private divine theft. That makes it religious. Kale reached into his belt pouch, removed a small strip of dried meat, and held it toward the darkness. The stag took it delicately and vanished behind the trees. You're feeding it, Ronan said. I'm preventing property damage. Your face softened. My face did not soften. Aurelia, did his face soften? She looked at Kale. His expression was, indeed, slightly less granite than usual. There was something almost, not quite, warm in the amber of his eyes. I didn't see anything, Aurelia said diplomatically. Liar, Ronan whispered. Thank you, Kale said, directed at Aurelia. His voice held a note that might have been gratitude or might have been warning. He caught her looking. She looked away. He didn't. Part 7, The Storm Valley. The stag woke her before dawn. It did this by sticking its head through the shelter entrance, knocking its antlers against the lintel again, which she was starting to suspect it did on purpose, and breathing warm, frostberry-scented breath directly into her face. No, Aurelia said. The stag breathed on her again. I just went to sleep. The stag pulled at her blanket with its teeth. You are a sacred relic of the moon goddess, and you have the manners of a barn cat. The stag blinked, pulled harder. She got up. She pulled on her boots, wrapped Kale's cloak around her shoulders, and followed the stag into the pre-dawn dark. This time, it led her north and up, higher than the camp, higher than the ice cliff, into the mountains proper, where the trees gave way to bare stone and the wind hit like a wall. She climbed for 2 hours. The stag moved ahead of her, its silver body glowing faintly, its antlers cutting the wind like a prow. It never looked back to check on her. It simply walked, steady and patient, trusting her to keep up. At the top, the world opened. She stood on the edge of a valley, a vast, sweeping gorge cut into the mountain by centuries of storms. Below her, the valley floor was hidden in clouds. Above her, the sky was gray and heavy, pressed down like a lid. No moon. No stars. The wind screamed. The stag walked to the edge of the valley and stopped. It turned its head to her. This time, Aurelia understood without being told. The ice cliff had been about finding her senses again, her wolf sense of smell, buried under years of court numbness. The wolf den had been about finding her instinct to protect, her Luna's drive to guard, to heal, to enter danger for the sake of something smaller and more vulnerable. This, the storm valley, the howling wind, the empty sky, was about finding her voice. Her howl. She had not howled in 3 years. At Ashenmoor, Luna howls were ceremonial. Performed on schedule, at approved volumes, on approved occasions. Kaelin had never said she couldn't howl. He simply made it clear, with raised eyebrows and cooled silences, that raw, instinctual howling was beneath a queen. So she had stopped. She had buried her howl the way she had buried her wolf, deep, deep down, under layers of grace and compliance and love for a man who used her devotion as entertainment. The wind hit her like a fist. Her cloak whipped behind her. Her golden hair streamed out in a banner, bright against the gray. She opened her mouth. Nothing came out. She tried again. Her throat clenched. Her chest tightened. 3 years of silence had calcified into a physical block, a wall of muscle memory that said, *, be quiet. Be composed. Be as Luna, not your own wolf, *. The stag nudged her hand. Its muzzle was warm. She looked at it. I can't, she whispered. The stag nudged her again. Harder. She closed her eyes. She thought about the mating ceremony. The way the moonlight had poured through the great hall windows like liquid silver. The way Kaelin had held her hands and said her name. Her real name, not Luna, not my queen. And the way his wolf's eyes had looked out through his human face, wild and adoring and completely, utterly present. She thought about the first time he stopped looking at her like that. She thought about the last time. She thought about the chains, the ceremony, the ring on the floor, the crack. She thought about climbing the ice cliff with bloody hands. She thought about the wolf pups crawling into her lap. She thought about Ivira's carved pendant and Bryn's grudging respect and Ronan's irreverent grin and the stag eating bread with divine impunity. She thought about Kael saying, "You didn't need help." She opened her mouth. The howl started low, broken, fractured, more sob than sound. It cracked in the middle, the way her voice used to crack when she cried into her pillow at Ashenmoor and muffled the sound so the servants wouldn't hear. But she did not stop. She howled through the crack. She howled through the grief. She howled through the silence of 3 years, and the love that had curdled, and the crown that had crushed, and the man who had taken the only nerve he had left and ground it between his fingers until it screamed. The second howl was stronger. It rose from her chest like something physical, a column of sound that pushed through her throat and burst into the storm. The wind caught it and threw it across the valley, and the valley threw it back, and the echoes layered and built until the sound was everywhere. The third howl was hers. Not a Luna's howl. Not a queen's howl. Not a wife's howl. Hers. It was the howl of a woman who had loved, been broken, crawled through the dark, climbed the ice, healed the wounded, and stood on the edge of a storm to find out what was left of her when everything else was stripped away. What was left was this, a voice that shook the mountain. The sky cracked. Not thunder. Not lightning. The clouds split straight down the center like a curtain being torn, and through the gap, pale, silver, impossibly bright, the moon returned. It poured down into the valley like a river of light. It hit the stone, the trees, the stag's antlers, Aurelia's hair, the tears on her face. It was warm. Not heat warm. Soul warm. The warmth of being seen by something ancient and enormous and gentle. Aurelia stood in the moonlight, chest heaving, cheeks wet, her howls still echoing off the valley walls, and she felt her wolf, her real wolf, rise inside her like a tide. Not Kaelin's wolf. Not the moon's wolf. Her wolf. She tipped her head back, let the moonlight pour over her face, and laughed. Not a happy laugh, exactly. A wild one. The kind that comes when you have been drowning so long that breaking the surface feels like a new birth, and the first breath tastes like freezing air and freedom, and the terrifying knowledge that you are alive and no one is holding you up. The stag stood beside her, its antlers blazing with captured moonlight, and for the first time it made a sound, a low, resonant call, deep and old, the sound of a creature acknowledging an equal. Below them, in the wild camp, every wolf heard the howl. Bryn stopped mid-sentence. Ronan dropped his cup. The elders stood. And Kael, who was standing on the eastern ridge, where he had followed at a distance because he had been following her since the ice cliff, because he could not seem to stop, looked up at the moon. It was back, full, bright, brighter than he had ever seen it. And in the center of all that light, tiny on the mountaintop, golden hair streaming, was the woman who had called it home. Cale's wolf stirred in his chest, not the restless, strategic, controlled stirring of a pack leader assessing a situation, but something deeper and far more dangerous. Something he had never felt before. He closed his eyes, opened them. The moon was still there. She was still there. He went to find his sword. Part 8, The King's Hunt. Kalen came on the third day. He did not send riders. He did not send a delegation. He came himself, as Aurelia had known he would, because Kalen Ashworth had never once in his life trusted anyone else to do the things that mattered to him. And Aurelia mattered to him. Not in the way a husband should value a wife. Not in the way a king should honor a Luna. In the way a flame matters to a man who has gone numb, the only source of heat in a frozen body, the only sensation that still registers. He brought 50 soldiers, armored, mounted, the Black Guard of Ashimore, his personal battalion, the wolves who answered to no one but the king. He also brought Serafina. This was strategic, not romantic. Serafina was a mirror, a beautiful, sharp-edged mirror he could hold up to Aurelia and say, "Asterisk see? See what I replaced you with? Does it hurt? Show me that it hurts, asterisk." Serafina, for her part, still believed she was winning. She rode beside Kalen on a white mare, wearing a traveling gown of deep garnet, her dark auburn hair braided with silver thread. The crescent moon crown sat on her head, and she wore it with the confidence of a woman who had not yet realized that the crown had gone cold the moment Aurelia left the castle. The moon had not responded to Serafina. Not once. Not during the nightly rituals. Not during the territorial blessings. Not when Serafina stood on the Luna's balcony, in the Luna's gown, with the Luna's crown, and howled as loud as she could into a moonless sky. Nothing. Kalen had watched her fail with the detached interest of a scientist observing a predictable experiment. "Why does the crown look dead on you?" he had asked, his voice flat, his eyes already looking past her. Serafina had stammered, made excuses, blamed the weather, the season, the old rituals. Kalen had turned away before she finished speaking. Now, riding through the wild forest, he did not look at her at all. His silver eyes were fixed ahead, scanning the tree line, reading the terrain the way a predator reads a hunting ground. He could feel the moon again. It had returned 2 nights ago. He had felt it like a punch to the ribs, sudden and overwhelming, and his wolf had thrown itself against his control with a force it hadn't shown in years. She had called the moon back. His Luna. His mate. His ruin. She had done the one thing no other wolf in the kingdom could do, and she had done it without him, and the knowledge burned in his chest like swallowed coals. He wanted her back. Not to love her. Not to apologize. Not to give her flowers and whisper pretty words and rebuild what he had broken. He wanted her back because she was the only creature alive who could make him feel anything, and she had dared to walk away. "Kalen." Serafina's voice tentative. "The scouts say the wild packs are mobilizing. Perhaps we should." "We should nothing," Kalen said, not looking at her. "We continue. But if the Wolf King..." "The Wolf King is a dog with a territory he cannot defend. He will give her back, or I will take her." Serafina fell silent. She was starting to notice things she had ignored before. The way Kalen's jaw tightened when he said her. The way his fingers flexed on his reins. The way his entire body, his entire attention, his entire being was oriented toward one direction, wherever Aurelia was. A small, cold understanding began to form in Serafina's chest. She pushed it down. She was not ready to look at it yet. The wild pack scouts saw Kalen's force an hour before it reached the camp. Bryn sounded the alert. Wolves moved to defensive positions, not panicked, not chaotic, with the practiced efficiency of a pack that had defended its territory many times before. Kale armed himself. Long sword. Short blade. Nothing ceremonial. He found Aurelia at the edge of the camp, looking south. She had changed in the 3 days since the Storm Valley. Not physically, though the boots and a borrowed hunting tunic had replaced the ceremonial gown. The change was in her posture, in her eyes, in the way she held herself, grounded, centered, her wolf no longer buried but present, awake, watching through her sea-green gaze. "He's coming," she said. "I know. He has 50 soldiers. I have 300 wolves. He won't care about the numbers. He'll care about proving a point. What point? That I belong to him. Kale was silent for a moment. Do you? He asked. She looked at him. What? Belong to him. I broke the moon ring. Rings are symbols. I'm asking about you. She held his gaze. The wind moved her golden hair. The moon, bright now restored, her moon, hung above the treeline like a lantern. No, she said. I don't. He nodded. Once. Then he did something unexpected. He reached into the collar of his tunic and pulled out a carved bone pendant, identical to the one Ivira had given Aurelia, except larger, older, worn smooth by decades of skin contact. My grandmother gave me this, he said, the night she told me I would know the right wolf when I saw one. She said I would know because my wolf would go still, not excited, not aggressive, still. The way a wolf goes still before it commits. He tucked the pendant back inside his tunic. My wolf has been still since I watched you climb that cliff, he said. Then he turned and walked toward the southern perimeter. Aurelia stood there, hand on the bone pendant at her own throat, heart hammering, watching him go. The meeting happened in the clearing between the old forest and the wild camp. Kalen rode forward alone, leaving his soldiers at the tree line. His dark hair was immaculate. His armor was black and silver. His face, that perfect, carved, devastating face, showed nothing. Kale walked forward alone from the campside. No horse, no armor, just the man, the sword, and the amber eyes. They stopped 30 feet apart. Thornwood, Kalen said. Ashworth, Kale said. You have something that belongs to me. I have a woman who climbed into my territory of her own will, called the moon from the sky with her own voice, and healed a wild wolf den with her own hands. Nothing about that sentence contains the word belongs. Kalen's lips curved. Not a smile. A showing of teeth. She is my mate, he said. She was your mate. She broke the ring. A ring is a symbol. Then the symbol chose to shatter under her heel. In front of every mirror in the kingdom. I am the king. She will return with me. Kale tilted his head. The gesture was lupin, a wolf assessing whether the thing in front of it was worth fighting or merely inconvenient. Ask her, Kale said. I do not ask. I am king. You are king of Ashenmoor. This is the wilds. Here, you are a man standing in another man's forest, asking for a woman who has already said no. Kalen's wolf surged. The soldiers at the tree line felt it, a wave of alpha pressure, the kind that made lesser wolves crumble. It rolled across the clearing like a physical force, pressing against Kale, pressing against the trees, pressing against the air itself. Kale did not move. His wolf met Kalen's pressure and held. Not with brute force, though he had plenty, but with the kind of absolute, rooted certainty that comes from a wolf who knows its own ground. The pressure held for 5 seconds. 10. 20. Then it broke. Not because either wolf submitted, but because Kalen pulled his back, not in defeat, but in reassessment. His silver eyes flickered. He had expected an easy push. He had not expected an equal. She is still mine, Kalen said, quieter now, and for the first time, the mask cracked enough for Aurelia, watching from the camp ridge, to hear something underneath the arrogance. Need. Not love. Need. The need of a man who had burned every source of warmth in his life and now stood in the cold, demanding the last fire return to his hands. Kale heard it too. Then why, Kale said, his voice low and steady and carrying, does she stand behind me by choice? Kalen's eyes moved past Kale, up to the ridge, where Aurelia stood with the moonlight in her hair and the wind pulling at Kale's cloak around her shoulders. She did not flinch. She did not hide. She looked back at him, at the man she had loved, the man she had married, the man whose wolf's name she still carried in the deepest chamber of her memory, and she shook her head. Once. No. Kalen stared at her for a long, long moment. Then he smiled, that wrong smile, the one that looked like hunger and tasted like obsession. Bring her, he said. 2 black guard soldiers stepped away from the tree line and started up the ridge toward Aurelia. One of them, a broad wolf with a black helm and a silver chain at his belt, reached for her wrist as if the old ceremony had never ended. He never touched her. Kale moved faster than the eye could follow. 1 heartbeat he stood in the clearing. The next, the soldier was face down in the frost with Kale's boot between his shoulder blades and his chain tangled around his own armored wrists. The second soldier froze with his hand half raised. Kale did not draw blood. He did not need to. The pressure of his wolf dropped over the clearing, cold and absolute. Even Kalen's horse sidestepped. Touch her again, Kale said, his voice quiet enough to be intimate and clear enough for every wolf to hear. And you will crawl back to Ashenmoor using the hand she permits you to keep. Ronan, somewhere behind the ridge stones, made a soft, delighted sound. That, he whispered, is going in my memoir. Aurelia looked down at the guard pinned in the frost. Then she looked at Kaelin. You sent a hand for me, she said. Your hand is on the ground. Kaelin's smile faltered for the first time. The wild wolves laughed, not loudly, not carelessly, but with a sharp, savage pleasure that rolled through the trees like teeth clicking shut. Kaelin's eyes moved from Aurelia to Kael, then to the soldier under Kael's boot. He understood the message. Here, his commands were not law. Here, Aurelia's refusal had teeth. This is not over, he said. Kael released the soldier only after Aurelia turned away. The guard scrambled back to the black guard on shaking legs, his pride bruised worse than his body. Kaelin turned his horse. He rode back to his soldiers. The black guard withdrew into the trees. He did not look back. He didn't need to. He would be back. He would always be back. Because Aurelia was the only thing left in the world that made him feel anything, and a man who has spent years going numb does not surrender his last sensation. Part 9, the bandage scene. That night, the camp was tense. Wolves patrolled in doubled shifts. The elders spoke in low voices. Even Ronan was subdued, though subdued, for Ronan still meant he told 3 jokes during dinner, all of them aimed at Kaelin's hair. Do you think he conditions it? Ronan asked. In a war zone, that level of shine requires intention. Ronan, Bryn said. I'm serious. Strategic hair care is a valid tactical concern. Ronan. Bryn. Shut up. I will not. Aurelia sat by the fire, knees pulled to her chest, watching the flames. She was not afraid of Kaelin. She was tired of him. Tired of being the nerve he pressed to feel alive. Tired of being the wound he picked at to prove he was still human. She wanted it to be over. Not the way it was over now, tense, unresolved, a threat hanging in the air. She wanted it finished. She wanted to face him, beat him, take the throne he had poisoned, and remake it into something that did not need cruelty to function. She wanted to be free. Kael appeared beside her without warning. He moved like that, silent, sudden, always arriving from the direction she wasn't looking. Your hands, he said. She looked down. The cuts from the ice cliff had reopened during the day. She had been gripping her sword hilt during the standoff, squeezing too hard, and the scabs had split. Blood beaded along the lines of her palms. They're fine, she said. They're bleeding. Barely. He sat down beside her. He set a leather pouch on his knee, opened it, and began pulling out cloth strips and a small clay pot of salve. Give me your hands, he said. I can do it myself. I know. Give me your hands. She looked at him. His face was lit by the fire, amber eyes, strong jaw, the faint crookedness of his nose. His expression was neutral, but his hands, holding the salve, were careful. Precise. She held out her hands. He worked in silence. He cleaned the cuts with water from a skin. He applied the salve, warm, herbal, stinging slightly, with his thumb, pressing gently along each line. His hands were large, calloused, scarred, and extraordinarily steady. He wrapped the cloth strips around her palms, tucking the ends neatly. Too tight? He asked. No. Tell me if it is. It's not. He finished. He did not immediately let go of her hands. He held them lightly, turned palm up in his own, and looked at the bandages as if checking his work. He was not checking his work. The fire crackled. The wind moved through the pines. Somewhere a wolf howled, not Aurelia's howl, just a regular patrol call, echoing off the mountain. You're staring at my hands, Aurelia said softly. I'm assessing. Assessing what? He looked up. His amber eyes met her sea-green ones, and the distance between them was very small, smaller than she had realized, smaller than either of them had intended. Whether you'll let me hold them again tomorrow, he said. She stared at him. He released her hands, stood, and walked away without another word. From across the fire, Ronan whispered to Bryn, did my brother just flirt? Bryn threw a pine cone at him. This time she didn't miss. Part 10, the old servant's warning. 3 days passed. Kaelin did not return. His soldiers remained at the forest border, visible, deliberate, a line of black armor at the tree line like a row of rotten teeth. They did not advance. They did not retreat. They watched. It was a siege without a wall. Kael doubled the patrols. Bryn organized hunting rotations that avoided the Ashenmoor line. The wild wolves, who had spent generations distrusting anything royal, began to accept Aurelia's presence with a grudging warmth that surprised even them. It started small. A hunter left a pair of fur-lined gloves by her sheltered door without a note. An elder's maid offered her a seat by the morning fire without being asked. The gray guard wolf from the den, the big female who had snarled at her, appeared at the camp clearing one evening and lay down 5 feet from Aurelia, her massive head on her paws, eyes half closed. She was not submitting. She was choosing proximity. For a wild wolf, that was more meaningful than any bow. On the third night, something unexpected arrived. A young woman, barely 20, dark-haired, terrified, stumbled into the camp's outer perimeter, hands raised, calling for mercy. The patrol wolves circled her, growling. "Don't hurt her," Aurelia said, stepping forward. The woman's name was Elda, and she was a servant from Ashenmore. Not just any servant. She was the old woman who had tended Aurelia's chambers for 3 years, who had braided her hair on ceremony nights, who had brought her warm milk when she couldn't sleep, who had once, quietly, pressed Aurelia's hand and whispered, "You deserve better than this, my lady." Elda had aged 20 years in 3 days. "My lady," she gasped, falling to her knees. "I came. I had to come. The king, he's planning." "Breathe," Aurelia said, kneeling beside her. "Breathe first." Elda breathed. She drank the water Bryn offered. She sat by the fire, wrapped in a blanket, and told them. Kalen was not waiting at the border out of patience. He was waiting because his scholars, the old moon scholars, the ones who studied the ancient texts, had found something. A way to force a Luna bond back into existence. An old ritual. Dark. Painful. Requiring moonlight, which he now had again because Aurelia had called it back, and a fragment of the original moon ring, which he had retrieved from the great hall floor after she left. "He kept the broken pieces," Elda said, her voice shaking. "He sat in the throne room after you left, in the dark, picking silver shards off the floor. Laughing. The fire was very quiet. He doesn't want to replace you," Elda continued. "He never wanted that woman. He told the scholars, I heard him, he said, I want my Luna back. Not her obedience. Her. The version with claws." Aurelia closed her eyes. There it was. The final confirmation of what she had already known. Kalen did not love Seraphina. Kalen did not want a replacement. Kalen wanted Aurelia. Specifically the version of Aurelia who had finally fought back, who had finally shown teeth, who had finally become dangerous enough to interest him. He wanted to cage a wolf that bit. Because a wolf that bit felt like something. "The ritual," Kale said from the shadows. His voice was flat. "When?" "The next full moon," Elda said. 3 days. Kale looked at Aurelia. Aurelia looked at Kale. "Then we don't wait 3 days," Aurelia said. Part 11, the plan. They planned it in Kale's shelter, around a table covered in rough-drawn maps of Ashimore Castle and its surrounding territory. Aurelia knew the castle. Every corridor, every servant's passage, every blind spot in the guard rotation. She had walked those halls for 3 years, invisible in the way that good Lunas were supposed to be invisible. Present everywhere, noticed nowhere. Now her invisibility was a weapon. "The Moon Mirror Hall," she said, tracing a line on the map. "That's where he'll perform the ritual. It's the only room in the castle where every mirror can be activated at once. He'll want witnesses. He always wants witnesses." "How many guards?" Kale asked. "The hall itself, 4. The approach is 12. The Blackguard barracks are here," she pointed, 2 minutes away at a run. "So we have 2 minutes. Less. Kalen keeps 3 personal guards in the throne room adjacent. They'll hear the commotion." Kale studied the map. His amber eyes moved over the lines with the focused attention of a man who had planned raids and defenses for over a decade. "The moon mirrors," he said. "You said they carry images to every pack." "Yes. Can they carry images from another location?" "Not the hall, somewhere else." Aurelia frowned. "In theory. The mirrors respond to Luna authority. If a true Luna activated them from another point, then every pack would see what you wanted them to see." "Yes. But I would need to be in physical contact with at least one moon mirror." Kale leaned back. "Then we bring the fight to the mirror hall. You activate the mirrors. Every pack sees what happens next. And what happens next is the king answering for what he's done." "A trial," Aurelia said. "A public trial. In front of every wolf in the kingdom. He won't submit to a trial. He doesn't have to submit. He has to be seen. And the moon, your moon, will do the rest." Bryn, leaning against the doorframe, spoke up. And if his 50 black guard decide to fight 300 wild wolves in a castle corridor? Then they decide wrong, Kale said simply. Ronan, sitting cross-legged on the floor, raised a hand. Quick logistical question. When we say public trial, are we talking formal charges, evidence presentation, witness testimony? We're talking about Aluna standing in front of every mirror in the kingdom and letting them see the truth, Aurelia said. No scrolls, no evidence, just me and the moon and the king who lost both. Ronan lowered his hand. That's significantly more dramatic. I approve. One more thing, Kale said. His voice changed, harder, lower. The forced bond ritual. Does Kalen have the materials? The broken ring fragments, Aurelia said. And access to moonlight. Then he has what he needs. If we don't move before the full moon, he'll try the ritual whether you're in the castle or not. Some forced bond rituals can work at a distance. They just require the Luna's scent, her blood, or a piece of the original oath. He has all three, Elda said quietly. He kept your hairbrush, your night shift, the ring shards. Your blood is in the mating record scrolls. Every Luna's is. The shelter was very still. Aurelia looked at the map. At the castle she had called home for 3 years. At the mirror hall, where she had danced with Kalen on the night the wolves howled for an hour. We move tomorrow night, she said. Part 12, the march. They moved at dusk. 300 wild wolves, in human and wolf form, pouring through the old forest like a river of shadow. No banners. No drums. No announcement. They moved the way wild things move, silent, fast, spread wide enough to avoid bottlenecks, close enough to converge in seconds. Kale led from the front. He did not ride. He walked, his long sword on his back, his pace steady and relentless, and the wolves flowed around him like water around a stone. Aurelia walked beside him. She wore the hunting tunic, the lined boots, Kale's dark cloak over her shoulders. Her golden hair was braided back. The bone pendant hung at her throat. She carried no weapon. She had never been trained with a sword, and she would not pretend otherwise. Her weapon was the moon. The stag did not walk in the open with the army. Kale had made that rule with the same tone he used for border defenses. A creature large enough to make old wolves kneel did not stroll through public sight like a camp mascot. It moved parallel to them behind the thickest trees, seen only in brief silver flashes by Aurelia, Kale, Bryn, Ronan, and the few scouts sworn to silence. It did, however, attempt one private attack on Ronan's jerky pouch. Ronan survived by clutching the pouch to his chest and whispering, "I respect your holiness, but this is smoked elk and I have limits." "You have jerky," Bryn had observed. "It has the moon goddess's favor. I know who I'd bet on." By midnight, they reached the edge of the old forest, where the tree line gave way to the rolling farmland surrounding Ashenmore Castle. The castle rose against the sky like a black fong. Torches burned along its walls. The black guard patrolled the battlements. And the moon, Aurelia's moon, the moon she had howled back from nothing, hung above it all, full and silver and bright. Aurelia stopped at the tree line. Kale stopped beside her. "If this goes wrong," she said quietly, "he'll try to force the bond. I'll lose myself. My wolf, my voice, my choice, all of it. It won't go wrong. If it does." Kale was silent for a moment. "If it does," he said, "I will cut the bond out of the air with my own claws before it touches you. And then I will level this castle stone by stone until there is nothing left for him to sit on." She looked at him. His profile was sharp in the moonlight, his jaw set, his amber eyes fixed on the castle with a focus that was not strategic planning. It was promise. "That's dramatic," she said. "I'm told I under-emote. I'm compensating." She almost laughed. It came out as a huff of breath, somewhere between amusement and terror. "Kale. Yes. Thank you. For the boots. The cloak. The salve. The army. You're welcome. And for not catching me when I fell off the cliff." The corner of his mouth moved. "You're welcome for that too." They looked at each other in the moonlight, at the edge of a forest, with a battle ahead of them and a madman behind the walls. Then Aurelia straightened her shoulders, set her jaw, and walked out of the trees. Part 13, the breach. They took the eastern gate. It was the smallest entrance, a service gate used by kitchen staff and huntsmen, barely wide enough for a cart. Aurelia had used it 100 times to visit the castle herb garden. The guards there were old, comfortable, accustomed to nothing more threatening than a late delivery of turnips. They were not accustomed to 30 wild wolves emerging from the dark at a dead sprint. The gate fell in 90 seconds. Kale's wolves poured through the service corridors, splitting into 3 groups. One to secure the barracks and delay the Black Guard, one to hold the Great Hall, and one, led by Kale and Aurelia, heading straight for the Moon Mirror Hall. The castle was chaos. Servants fled. Guards shouted. Somewhere a horn blew, too late, too scattered, too confused to organize a real defense before the wild wolves were already inside. Aurelia moved through the corridors she knew by heart, left past the kitchens, right at the portrait gallery, down the narrow spiral stair that no one used because the steps were uneven and the torches were never lit. She lit them now, with moonlight. Not fire, moonlight. It poured from her hands the way it had once poured through the great hall windows, and it filled the stairwell with silver radiance that made the stone glow. She was not doing this consciously. Her wolf was doing it. The moon was doing it. The 3 of them, woman, wolf, moon, were working together for the first time, and the power that flowed through the connection was staggering. They reached the mirror hall door. It was locked. Kale put his boot through it. The door exploded inward, and they entered the most sacred room in Ashenmoor, a circular chamber lined with 20 tall mirrors, each one a moon mirror, each one connected to a pack hall somewhere in the kingdom. The mirrors were dark. The room was lit only by the moonlight streaming through a single high window. Kalen was not there. He's in the throne room, Aurelia said. He expected us to come to him. Then he expected wrong. Kale turned to her. Light the mirrors. She walked to the central mirror, the largest, the oldest, the one that had cracked when she broke the ring. The fracture line still ran down its surface like a scar. She pressed her hand against the glass. The mirror woke. Silver light flooded the surface. The glass hummed, and one by one, like candles catching fire in a circle, every mirror in the hall lit up. 20 mirrors, 20 pack halls, 20 territories. Every wolf in the kingdom, woken from sleep, stumbling into their halls, staring at their mirrors. They saw Aurelia, golden hair, sea-green eyes, the bone pendant of a wild wolf at her throat, moonlight pouring from her hands into the mirror like liquid fire. They saw the Moon Mirror Hall, its cracked central mirror, its dusty floor, its evidence of a sacred space neglected and forgotten by a king who cared more about his throne than his oath. And then they heard her voice. Not Luna's voice. Not a command. Just Aurelia, speaking clearly into 20 mirrors, to every wolf in the kingdom. My name is Aurelia. 3 years ago, I stood in this room and made a moon oath to your king. I swore to protect this kingdom, to serve its packs, to be the Luna that every wolf deserved. I kept that oath. Every day. Every night. Through plague and famine and war. She paused. Your king broke his oath to me. Not with another woman, though he used one to hurt me. He broke it by turning his love into a cage, his devotion into a weapon, and his Luna into a game. He did not betray me for someone else. He betrayed me for the thrill of watching me suffer. 20 mirrors. 20 halls. Thousands of wolves listening. I broke the moon ring. I left the castle. I walked into the dark, and the moon came with me. She let that land. Tonight, your king planned to force the moon bond back onto me against my will, using an ancient ritual, using my blood, using fragments of an oath he shattered. I am here to stop him, and I am asking every pack in this kingdom to witness what happens next. The mirrors blazed. Part 14, The King's Last Stand. The throne room doors opened. Kalen walked in. He was alone. No guards. No Seraphina. Just the king, in his black and silver armor, his dark hair perfect, his silver eyes burning with an intensity that would have made a lesser wolf drop to its knees. He looked at Aurelia, standing in the mirror hall doorway. He looked at Kale, standing behind her, sword drawn. He looked at the 20 blazing mirrors. And he smiled. That smile. The wrong one. The one that looked like hunger. There she is, he said softly. My beautiful ruin. I'm not yours, Aurelia said. You will always be mine. The bond doesn't end because you cracked a ring, Aurelia. I can feel you in my chest like a second heartbeat. Can you feel me? She could. That was the horror of it. Deep inside, buried under the new strength and the wolf and the moonlight, there was still a thread, thin, frayed, aching, that connected her to him. 3 years of love did not vanish because the ring broke. The ring was a symbol. The love was real, and the scar of it was permanent. I feel what's left of something you poisoned, she said. That's not the same as love. It's better, Kalen said, and meant it. Love is boring. What we have now, this, the fight, the chase, the way you look at me like you want to tear my throat out, this is alive. Can't you feel it? That's not alive, Kalen. That's sick. He took a step closer. I built this kingdom for you. Every war I won, every territory I claimed, every pack I brought to heal, it was for you. So you would be Luna of something worthy. And what did you do? You stood there, year after year, being perfect and beautiful and kind, and you never once pushed back. You never once showed me. Showed you what? That your cruelty hurt. You knew it hurt. That was the point. The point, Kalen said, his voice dropping, was to find you. The real you. Under all that grace. Under all that patience. I knew she was there, the wolf who could match me. The wolf who could bite. And you hid her from me for 3 years. I didn't hide her. You killed her. Day by day. Silence by silence. I buried my wolf to survive you. And now she's back. His eyes were bright. Fevered. Look at you. Moonlight in your hands. A wild king at your back. My wolf still howling your name in my chest. You were never meant to be a quiet Luna, Aurelia. You were meant to be a storm. And I. You were meant to be my shelter, she said, and her voice cracked for the first time. You were meant to be the one place my wolf felt safe. And you turned it into a game. The mirrors carried every word. Every pack heard the crack in her voice. Every pack heard the king's confession, not of infidelity, but of something worse. Of loving someone and choosing to weaponize it. Of needing someone and choosing to break them to feel the need more sharply. Kalen looked at the mirrors. He did not seem surprised. You want witnesses, he said. Fine. Let them watch. He reached into his armor and pulled out a leather pouch. Inside it, silver shards. The broken moon ring, reassembled into a rough, glinting cluster. The ritual doesn't require your consent, he said. Only your blood, your scent, and moonlight. I have all 3. He raised the shards. The moonlight from the high window caught them, and they began to glow, a sickly, wrong glow, like moonlight reflected through dirty water. Aurelia felt it. A pull, deep in her chest. The frayed thread between them tightened, and for a terrible moment, she felt her wolf falter, not from weakness, but from memory. From the 3 years of love that had been real before it rotted. Kale moved. He stepped in front of Aurelia, his sword raised, his body between her and the glowing shards. Put them down, Kale said. Kalen looked at him. The dog speaks. The dog has 300 wolves in your castle and a sword aimed at your chest. Put the shards down. Or what? You'll kill me? In front of every mirror in the kingdom? That would make you a kingslayer, Thornwood. Your precious wild honor wouldn't survive it. My honor will survive anything. Your ritual won't survive my blade. Kalen's smile widened. He raised the shards higher. The glow intensified. The pull in Aurelia's chest became a yank. She gasped. Staggered. Kale did not turn around. He could hear her behind him, the catch of her breath, the scrape of her boots on stone. His knuckles went white on the sword grip. Last chance, Kale said. Kalen opened his mouth to speak. Aurelia stepped around Kale. She walked forward, past the sword, past the protection, straight toward Kalen. The shards pulled at her. The thread screamed. Her wolf howled inside her chest. Not in submission, not in love, in fury. She stopped 3 feet from Kalen. You want to see my wolf? She said. The one you spent 3 years trying to provoke. The one you used Seraphina to bait? The one you chained in a ceremony hall and tried to strip in front of the kingdom? She raised her hand. Moonlight gathered in her palm. Not the sickly glow of the forced ritual. Real moonlight. Pure silver burning, the kind that had returned when she howled on the storm valley, the kind that answered only to her. Here she is, Aurelia said. She pressed her palm against the shards in his hand. The moonlight hit the broken ring fragments like sunlight hitting shadow. The shards screamed. Not metaphorically. They made a sound, a high, thin, keening wail, as the real moonlight burned through the forced ritual's corruption. The sickly glow shattered. The shards blackened, crumbled, and fell through Kalen's fingers as ash. The thread in Aurelia's chest snapped. She felt it go, felt the last frayed remnant of the moon bond dissolve like smoke, and for one heartbeat, there was a void inside her so vast she thought she would collapse into it. Then the void filled. Not with Kalen, not with grief. With her. Her wolf. Her moon. Her voice. Her choice. She looked at Kalen. His hand was empty. The ash of 3 years' worth of obsession drifted between his fingers. His face, for the first time since the ceremony, showed something other than hunger. It showed loss. Real loss. The kind that comes when a man who has spent years numbing himself suddenly feels everything at once. "It's over, Kalen," she said. He stared at her. His silver eyes were wide, wet, almost human. His wolf, that proud, tortured wolf, pressed against his ribs, whimpering the same way it had whimpered in the great hall, but quieter now. Smaller. "It can't be over," he said, and his voice was not the voice of a king. It was the voice of the man she had married. The one underneath. The one who had held her in the dark and breathed like a drowning man. Aurelia stepped closer. Every mirror carried her movement. Every pack saw the woman Kalen had chained walk toward him without chains, without fear, without a man holding her upright. Kalen lifted his hand as if to touch her face. She slapped him. The sound cracked through the throne room like a split branch in winter. His head turned with the force of it. The mark of her palm bloomed bright across his beautiful cheek. The mirrors carried that too. A gasp traveled through 20-pack halls. Somewhere behind Aurelia, Ronan made a soft, delighted, absolutely unhinged laugh. The kind of laugh a sane man should not make in a throne room full of armed wolves. "Oh," he breathed, eyes shining. That was historic. Kale did not laugh. He watched Kalen with the cold attention of a wolf waiting for a body to move wrong. Kalen slowly turned his face back. His cheek was reddening. His eyes were no longer wet. They were bright, burning. "There she is," he whispered. Aurelia's stomach turned. "No," she said. "You do not get to make my anger into your reward." She turned to the mirrors. Witnesses of Ashenmoor. Witnesses of the border packs. Witnesses of the wilds. Hear the charges. The throne room doors filled with Kale's wolves. Bryn stood at the front, one hand on her sword. Ronan stood at her shoulder, grinning like a beautiful lunatic who had just been handed the best chapter of his life. Behind them waited the elders, patrol captains, servants, and former Black Guard soldiers who had already thrown down their weapons. Aurelia faced Kalen again. "Kalen Ashworth, you are charged under pack law with corruption of a sacred moon bond, attempted forced rebinding of a Luna against her will, abuse of mate right, unlawful public humiliation, and command of armed seizure after refusal was given." Kalen's lip curled. "You think law binds me?" "No," Aurelia said. "That is why it must be made to." Bryn stepped forward carrying the moon cord, an old legal lash used in Ashenmoor long before Kalen's reign, braided from white wolf hide and moon silver thread. It was not meant to cut. It was meant to mark disgrace before witnesses. Its punishment was pain, shame, and record, not blood. Kalen looked at it. For the first time, real fury flashed over his face. "You would whip your king?" "No," Aurelia said. "I sentenced the man who tried to make a wife into property." She took the moon cord from Bryn. Kale moved one step closer. "Aurelia." She heard the warning in his voice. Not disapproval. Readiness. If she asked, he would do it for her. If she asked, he would carry every violent burden and never complain. That was why she did not ask. "This one is mine," she said. Kale's jaw tightened. Then he stepped back. Aurelia raised the moon cord. 9 lawful lashes," she said, voice carrying to every mirror. "One for the public chain. One for the stolen crown. One for the false charge. One for the forced ritual. One for the guards ordered to seize me. One for every year you made my kindness into your entertainment. And the last 3 for every winter I kept your kingdom alive while you learned how to hurt me better." Kalen's wolf surged. The room shook under his alpha pressure. Several younger wolves stumbled. Kale's wolf answered. The wilds answered with him. 300 wolves in the castle corridors, growling low, holding the pressure back. Aurelia did not move. The first lash struck across Kalen's back over the black ceremonial linen beneath his armor. He did not cry out. The second made his shoulders jerk. The third drove one knee half an inch toward the stone before he locked it straight by sheer pride. Ronan laughed again, softer and madder, clapping one hand over his own mouth as if trying to behave and failing by choice. "Look at that," he whispered to Bryn. The throne finally developed consequences. "Ronan," Bryn said. "I'm whispering. You're glowing. Justice agrees with my complexion." The 4th lash landed. The 5th. The 6th. No blood. No torn flesh. Only red marks, flinched muscles, and the sight every pack would remember. The Alpha King who had made every wolf watch his Luna fall now standing under the law he thought beneath him. At the seventh, Kalen laughed. Not with amusement. With rage, pain, fascination, and something broken enough to be almost awe. "You are magnificent," he said through his teeth. Aurelia's hand tightened on the cord. "I am not performing for you." The eighth lash cut the sentence out of him. The ninth landed in silence. When it was done, Aurelia lowered the moon cord and handed it back to Bryn. Her breathing was steady. Her hand did not shake. The mirrors blazed brighter. "Kalen Ashworth," Aurelia said, "by the authority of the moon that chose me, and by the witnesses of every pack in this kingdom, you are sentenced to containment in the mirror. Keep until the Council of Packs determines your permanent judgment. You will hold no command. You will issue no alpha order. You will touch no moon mirror except under guard. This sentence is legal, witnessed, and sealed." The Mirror Keep was the oldest prison in Ashenmoor, a tower lined with moon mirrors that suppressed a wolf's shift, used only for the most dangerous criminals. No king had ever been sentenced there. Kalen looked at Aurelia, at the wolves, at the mirrors, at Kale, standing behind her, sword drawn now, amber eyes steady. Then he smiled. The smile was wrong. Too calm, too alive. "You learned law," he said. "I learned doors." His cuff shifted. A sliver of black glass slid into his palm. Kale moved. Bryn moved. Aurelia moved. Kalen was faster than pain should have allowed. He drove the shard into the cracked central mirror. The glass rippled. The surface split, not breaking, opening like a wound in the air itself. Behind the glass, there was not a reflection. There was darkness. Vast, silver-edged, pulsing darkness. The mirrored dimension. The space between reflections. The place where old wolves said lost things went, lost memories, lost oaths, lost kings. Kale's sword cut through the space where Kalen's shoulder had been a heartbeat earlier. Bryn's hand caught only torn cloth. Kalen stood half inside the mirror, cheek marked by Aurelia's hand, back marked by the law, eyes fixed on her with a devotion so poisoned it was almost worse than hatred. "I told you," he said. "This is not over." Aurelia lifted her chin. "Then next time," she said, "come back with both cheeks ready." For one stunned heartbeat, the throne room was silent. Ronan broke first. He laughed so hard he bent at the waist, one hand on the wall, beautiful face bright with unholy joy. "I love my queen," he gasped. "I love this kingdom. I love laws now." Kalen's expression sharpened. Then the mirror swallowed him. The glass sealed behind him. The ripple stopped. The mirror went dark. The ancient shard fell to the floor, spent. The throne room was silent except for Ronan trying and failing to stop laughing. Kale lowered his sword slowly. Bryn stepped forward, checking the mirror, pressing her hand against the glass. Solid. Cold. Dead. "He's gone," Bryn said. Aurelia stared at the dark mirror. Gone. Not innocent. Not unpunished. Not untouched by law. Gone. Into a place no one could follow, with pain on his back, her palm on his face, and a fixation that had survived disgrace. She closed her eyes. She opened them. The mirrors were still blazing. Every pack still watching. She turned to face them. "The former king has fled lawful containment," she said. "His guilt is witnessed. His sentence remains. Any pack that shelters him will answer before the council. Any mirror that carries him will be sealed until it is cleansed." She paused. She looked at the mirrors, at the thousands of wolf faces staring back at her, waiting, frightened, uncertain, hopeful. The throne of Ashenmoor is empty. The forced ritual is destroyed. The moon bond is broken. And I. She drew one breath. "I am the Luna who called the moon back from the dark," she said. "And if this kingdom will have me, not as a wife, not as a symbol, not as a queen who sits quietly while the throne rots, but as a ruler who fights and heals and howls, then I will stay." Silence. Then from one mirror, the smallest, the one connected to the poorest border pack, the one that had been dark and forgotten for years, a howl. A single wolf, howling in recognition. Then another mirror. Another howl. Then another. And another. Within 60 seconds, every mirror in the hall was howling. 20 packs. Thousands of wolves. The sound filled the mirror hall, filled the throne room, filled the castle, filled the night. They were howling for her. Aurelia stood in the center of the howl, moonlight streaming through the window, golden hair blazing, tears running down her face, and felt her wolf throw back its head inside her chest and join the chorus. Kale stood behind her, sword sheathed, arms at his sides, and watched the woman he had seen climb an ice cliff barefoot and howl the moon back from nothing become a queen. He did not howl. He did not need to. His wolf was already hers. Part 15, The Queen's Court. The coronation was 3 days later. It was not like Kaelin's coronation, which Aurelia had seen in the archives. All black banners and forced kneeling, and a crown pressed onto his head by a high priest who looked terrified. Aurelia's coronation was held in the open air, in the castle courtyard, under the full moon. The wild wolves stood shoulder to shoulder with the Ashenmoor wolves. Border packs who had not visited the capital in a decade sent representatives. Even the far northern ice packs, the ones who answered to no one, sent a delegate, a grizzled old wolf woman who looked at Aurelia, sniffed once, and said, "She'll do." The moon crown was not Seraphina's silver-plated fake. It was a new crown, forged by the Wild Pack's smith, made of true moon silver, lighter, simpler, with a single moonstone at its center that glowed when Aurelia touched it and went dark when anyone else did. Kael placed it on her head. Not because he was claiming ownership, because she asked him to. "You carried me through the forest," she said. "Not physically, but you carried me. I'd like you to do this." He placed the crown on her golden hair with hands that were perfectly steady and a jaw that was very tight. "It suits you," he said quietly, so only she could hear. "Better than it suited Seraphina? Everything suits you better than it suited Seraphina. That's almost a compliment. I'm told I undercompliment. I'm compensating." She smiled. He almost smiled back. The wolves howled. Seraphina was found the next morning. She had not fled. She had not tried. When Aurelia's wolves took the castle, Seraphina had been in the Luna's chambers, the chambers that had once been Aurelia's, sitting at the vanity, staring at her reflection in a mirror that would not light up for her. She was still wearing the fake moon crown. It sat on her head, cold and dead and ordinary. When the guards brought her to the throne room, she did not fight. She did not snarl or scream or plead. She walked in, looked at Aurelia on the throne, the real throne, the one that hummed with moonlight under Aurelia's hands, and stopped. "You knew," Seraphina said. Her voice was flat. Empty. "You knew he didn't love me." "Yes," Aurelia said. "I didn't." Seraphina's eyes were dry, but her voice cracked. I was told he chose me. He put the crown on my head. He sat me at his table. I thought that meant. I know what you thought. He never looked at me the way he looked at you. Not once. I kept waiting. I thought if I wore the right gown, said the right things, stood in the right place." She stopped. Swallowed. "I was a knife. Wasn't I? A knife he pointed at you." "Yes. And I let myself be one. Because the alternative was admitting that no one had ever chosen me, and a knife felt better than invisible." The throne room was quiet. Aurelia studied Seraphina, the proud tilt of her chin, the dark circles under her eyes, the auburn hair that was tangled now, unwashed, because no servant had attended her since Kaelin vanished. She was pathetic. She was also, Aurelia recognized with painful clarity, telling the truth. "You are stripped of the moon crown," Aurelia said. "You will not hold any title in Ashenmoor." Bryn stepped forward and removed the false crown. It resisted for half a breath, then cracked across the crescent. Silver powder spilled down Seraphina's auburn hair and over her beautiful face. Not blood. Not ruin. Public record. Seraphina closed her eyes. "For impersonating a Luna and aiding a public humiliation under false regalia," Aurelia continued, "Pack law requires bodily restitution. You will serve the 9 dawn penance. At sunrise for 9 days, you will carry water from the lower well to the eastern healing wards until the ward matron releases you. After that, you will serve 6 months in those wards, tending the sick, the same wards I once ran, where the work is real and the need is constant." Seraphina flinched harder at the word work than she had at the cracked crown. "After 6 months, you may petition to leave or to remain. If you remain, you will be judged by your actions, not your past. If you leave, you go with provisions and a clean record." Seraphina stared at her. "You could have me locked in the mirror keep," she said. "I could. Why don't you?" Aurelia looked at her for a long moment. "Because I spent 3 years being punished for someone else's emptiness. I know what it feels like to be used as a prop. I won't do that to anyone, even you. But mercy is not exemption. Your body will carry the buckets. Your hands will do the labor. Your pride will learn the shape of a floor that needs scrubbing." Seraphina's chin trembled. She pressed her lips together hard. "Thank you," she whispered. "Don't thank me. Earn it. Serafina turned and walked out, flanked by guards, toward the eastern wards. For months later, the ward matrons would report that she still complained, but now she complained while working. By the 6th month, when a fevered child lived because Serafina stayed awake through the night cooling his skin, the eastern ward stopped calling her the false Luna and started calling her by her name. Part 16. The New Court. Aurelia ruled. Not perfectly, not easily, but she ruled the way she had always done everything, with thoroughness, kindness, stubborn determination, and the occasional flash of temper that made her advisors very alert and very cooperative. She reformed the tax system. She reopened the border pact trade routes that Kalen had strangled. She judged the Moon scholars who had helped Kalen develop the forced bond ritual under open pact law. Their ritual fingers were sealed in Moon silver oath cuffs for 1 full year. They were forbidden to touch sacred mirrors for life, and they were sentenced to 12 days hauling the broken mirror stones from the deep archives to the cleansing courtyard under public guard. No blood, no spectacle, just aching shoulders, blistered palms, and the knowledge that every pack knew what they had done. The black guard who had chained Aurelia, advanced on the wilds, or obeyed unlawful seizure orders were stripped of black armor and sentenced to the 9 roads. 9 months rebuilding the trade roads, flood walls, and winter granaries they had helped Kalen neglect. The punishment was legal, bodily, and humiliating. Former royal enforcers learned how heavy grain sacks were when no one bowed to carry them. She appointed Bryn as captain of the Queen's Guard. Bryn accepted with a grunt and immediately began reorganizing the castle's defenses with a terrifying efficiency that made the remaining old soldiers look at each other and silently agree to cooperate. Ivira, Bryn's sister, was given a permanent position in the castle as Aurelia's personal attendant, a title that, in practice, meant Ivira followed Aurelia everywhere, asked approximately 800 questions a day, and carved little bone animals for every person in the castle until the entire court was carrying tiny wolves and deer in their pockets. Elda, the old servant who had risked her life to warn them, was made head of the royal household. She cried. Aurelia held her. Ronan was given no official title, because every title Aurelia offered him was met with a counteroffer of something absurd. Minister of Strategic Observations? Only if I get a hat. Commander of Eastern Patrols? I don't like the East. Too many hills. Royal Advisor? I advise you to give me a better title. Ronan, Your Majesty. Pick something or I'll assign you to latrine inspection. He picked Warden of the Western Wood, which didn't exist, and promptly spent his days patrolling an area he had personally designated as his jurisdiction, which happened to include the best fishing stream and a very comfortable meadow. Kale stayed. He did not take a title either. He did not sit at the high table. He did not wear court clothes or attend formal dinners or participate in the elaborate social dances of Ashenmore politics. He did what he had always done. He patrolled, he guarded, he watched. But now he watched one person specifically. Part 17. The Queen and the Wolf King. The first week, Aurelia did not notice. The second week, she began to. Kale was always nearby. Not underfoot, never underfoot. He was too controlled for that, too aware of boundaries, too committed to the principle that Aurelia had fought for her autonomy, and he would not crowd it. But he was nearby. When she walked the corridors at night, reviewing the day's decisions in her head, she would turn a corner and find him leaning against a wall, sharpening his knife, as if he happened to be there. When she worked late in the study, the door would open and Kale would enter with a pot of tea he had not been asked to make, set it on the desk, and sit in the chair by the window with a book he never seemed to actually read. When she held court and a particularly aggressive lord pushed too hard on a trade dispute, she would catch Kale in the back of the room, arms crossed, staring at the lord with an expression that suggested the lord had approximately 4 seconds to reconsider his tone. The lord always reconsidered. One evening, Aurelia was crossing the courtyard after a late meeting when she found Kale sitting on the stone bench by the fountain, his sword across his knees, looking at the moon. "You're here," she said. "I'm often here. You're specifically here. At the exact time I cross this courtyard every night. Coincidence. 3 nights in a row. Persistent coincidence." She sat down beside him. The moonlight caught her crown, her hair, the fabric of her gown, pale blue tonight, one shoulder bare, the way the Wild Pack's tailor had designed all her new dresses because Aurelia had quietly requested it. "Kale. Aurelia. Are you guarding me?" "I'm sitting. With a sword. I always have a sword. At a fountain. I like fountains. You spent 30 years in a forest. You've never seen a fountain before this month. Which is why I like them. Novelty. She turned to face him. He turned to face her. The moonlight was between them, silver on his skin, warm on hers. You don't have to pretend, she said softly. I can smell your wolf from here. He's not calm. Cale was silent for a moment. No, he admitted. He's not. What is he? Another pause. Longer. Territorial, Cale said. Of what? He looked at her, and for the first time since she had known him, his control cracked, just slightly, just enough for her to see the blaze underneath. His amber eyes were not steady. They were molten. Of you, he said. Of this bench. Of every corridor you walk at night. Of every room you work in. Of the tea you drink, and the chair you sit in, and the air you breathe. My wolf has not been calm since the cliff, and he will not be calm until... He stopped. Until what? Aurelia whispered. Cale's jaw worked. He looked away, back at the moon. Until he is certain, Cale said, that no mirror, no shard, no ghost, and no memory can take you somewhere he cannot follow. Aurelia's heart did something complicated. She reached out and took his hand. His fingers tightened around hers immediately, not gently, not carefully, with the grip of a man who had been waiting to hold on and was not entirely sure he would be able to let go. I'm here, she said. I know. I'm not going through any mirrors. I know that too. Then why is your hand shaking? He looked down at their joined hands. His hand was indeed shaking, barely, almost imperceptibly, but enough for a Luna with moon-restored senses to feel. Because, he said very quietly, I did not fall for the woman the king broke. I fell for the woman who stood up after. And the thought of anything, pulling her back into that dark is not something my wolf or my human heart can tolerate with grace. Aurelia squeezed his hand. Grace, she said, is overrated. He looked at her. She looked at him. The fountain splashed. The moonlight poured. The distance between them was very small. If I asked to hold your hand again tomorrow, he said, would you say yes? Yes. And the day after? Yes. And every day until one of us runs out of days. Cale. Aurelia. That sounds like a proposal. It sounds like a question. Will you answer it? She leaned forward, close enough to see the flecks of gold in his amber eyes, close enough to feel his breath on her lips, close enough that his wolf and her wolf were pressing against the inside of their ribs, straining toward each other with a force that had nothing to do with forced bonds or broken rings or ceremonies. Just want. Pure, terrifying, chosen want. Yes, she said. He exhaled. A long, shaking breath that carried 3 months of tension, protectiveness, denied desire, and quiet, savage devotion. Then he lifted her hand to his lips and pressed a kiss to her bandaged palm, gently, reverently, the way a wolf greets its mate after a long and dangerous hunt. From behind the courtyard hedge, Ronan's voice drifted through the night air. Finally, Cale closed his eyes. I'm going to kill him. You can't kill your brother. Watch me. He's your only family. I'll make new family. Ronan's head appeared over the hedge. That's the most romantic thing you've ever said, and you said it about murdering me. Ronan, Aurelia said. Your Majesty. Go away. I'm the warden of the Western Wood. This courtyard is in my jurisdiction. This courtyard is east. Eva expended. Cale stood up, released Aurelia's hand, and walked toward the hedge with the calm, purposeful stride of a man who was about to commit fratricide. Ronan vanished. Aurelia sat on the bench, in the moonlight, and laughed. Part 18. The Ghost in the Glass. The castle settled. Days turned into weeks. Weeks into months. Aurelia's reign took root, not like a throne planted in stone, but like a tree growing through it, cracking the old foundations and making something new. Cale never took a formal title. The court called him the Queen's Wolf behind his back and my lord to his face, and he responded to neither with any visible emotion. But he was always there. At her council meetings, standing by the door, arms crossed, saying nothing unless a lord raised his voice, at which point Cale would uncross his arms and the lord would lower his voice immediately. At her side during evening walks, his hand near hers, sometimes touching, always available. At breakfast, sliding her plate closer to her when she got distracted by correspondence, refilling her tea before she noticed it was empty, and staring at Ronan with silent menace when Ronan attempted to steal her toast. You have your own toast, Cale said. Hers is better jam. It has the same jam. Royal jam tastes better. It's the same jam, Ronan. Agree to disagree. I'm going to put your hand in the jam. Is that a threat or a breakfast plan? Aurelia reached across the table and gave Ronan her toast. Cale stared at her with the expression of a man who had been deeply and personally betrayed. He asked nicely, Aurelia said. He did not ask at all. He implied. He stole. He's your brother. A fact I regret daily. Ronan ate the toast with theatrical satisfaction. One night late, very late, the castle asleep, the wolves on patrol, the corridors empty, Aurelia walked to the Moon Mirror Hall. She did this sometimes. Not often. Not deliberately. But there were nights when the castle felt too large and too quiet, and the memory of Kaelin's voice, "This is not over," echoed in the stone louder than it should have. She stood in the circular chamber, surrounded by 20 mirrors that glowed softly with ambient moonlight. The central mirror, the one he had stepped through, had been repaired. The crack was sealed, the glass re-silvered. It looked new. It did not feel new. Aurelia pressed her hand to the glass. Cool. Smooth. Ordinary. She stared at her own reflection. Golden hair. Sea-green eyes. Crown. The bone pendant at her throat. She looked like a queen. She turned to leave. In the mirror behind her, not the central one, a smaller one, the third from the left, the one connected to a pack hall in the far western mountains, something moved. Not her reflection. Something else. She turned back slowly. The mirror was still. Her reflection looked back at her, normal, undisturbed. But deep in the glass, behind the reflection, beneath the surface, two eyes stared out. Silver gray. Familiar. Burning with an intensity that had not dimmed, had not cooled, had not changed. Kaelin's eyes. They looked at her the way they had always looked at her. With hunger, with obsession, with the terrible, consuming need of a man who had traded his humanity for the right to keep feeling something. Aurelia's breath caught. The eyes blinked. Slowly. Once. Then they were gone. The mirror was just a mirror. Her reflection was just a reflection. She stood very still for a long time. Then she turned and walked out of the hall. Cale was in the corridor. He was leaning against the wall, arms crossed, wearing the expression of a man who had been casually passing by and had not at all been standing there for 20 minutes waiting for her to come out. "Wind moved the glass," he said. She looked at him. "You were watching." "I was nearby." In the corridor outside the mirror hall. At 3 in the morning. Large castle. Easy to get lost. She looked at the sword on his hip. The knife on his belt. The second knife strapped to his forearm. "You brought 3 weapons to get lost," she said. "I like being prepared." Cale. "Aurelia. Did you see it?" A pause. Barely a breath. "No," he said. "Do you believe me?" "Yes." "Do you think he's gone?" Cale was quiet for a long moment. His amber eyes held hers in the low torchlight. His jaw was tight. His wolf was not calm. She could smell it, taste it, feel it radiating from him like heat. "No," he said. The corridor was very quiet. "But if he is watching," Cale said, and his voice was low and steady and absolute, "let him learn how a queen is guarded." He unfolded from the wall. He pulled the dark cloak from his shoulders, the same cloak he had given her in the forest, months ago, the one that still smelled like pine smoke and leather and home, and draped it around her. His hands stayed on her shoulders. His palms were warm through the fabric. His thumbs rested against the nape of her neck, just below the edge of her hair, in the place where skin met warmth. "Come," he said. "I'll walk you back." "You don't have to." "I want to." "You always want to." "Yes." "Is that going to stop?" "No." "You're very stubborn." "I prefer devoted." "You prefer territorial." "Those are the same word." She laughed, softly, tiredly, the laugh of a woman who had stared into a mirror and seen a ghost, and was being walked home by a man whose answer to ghosts was more swords and closer proximity. They walked the corridor together. His hand moved from her shoulder to the small of her back, resting there with the comfortable possession of someone who had earned that position and intended to keep it. "Cale. If he does come back, he won't touch you. You don't know. He will not touch you. He will not reach you. He will not enter any mirror, any room, any shadow that you stand in, because I will be standing there first, and he will have to go through me to get to you, and I." He stopped walking. She stopped too. He turned to face her. The torchlight caught the hard lines of his face, the amber of his eyes, the set of his mouth. "I am not the kind of wolf who makes promises lightly," he said. "I am not the kind of man who says words he doesn't mean. And I am telling you, Aurelia, as your ally, your friend, your wolf king, and the man who has loved you since he watched you stand up on a cliff with bleeding feet and keep walking, that nothing in this world or behind any mirror will take you from me. She looked at him. You love me, she said. I just said that. You've never said it before. I've been saying it in every other way for 3 months. You're a brilliant queen. I assumed you noticed. I noticed. I wanted to hear it. Now you've heard it. Say it again. I love you. Again. I love you, Aurelia. One more time. I love you. Will you please stop making me repeat it in a corridor where Ronan might be eavesdropping? From somewhere in the darkness, very faintly. I'm not. Ronan. I was already here. I was going to the kitchens. It's 3 a.m. I was hungry. Cale closed his eyes. Took a long, slow breath. Opened his eyes. I am going to assign him to a post so remote that his only companions will be goats, he said. He'd charm the goats, Aurelia said. That's the problem. She took his hand. He laced his fingers through hers. They walked the rest of the corridor in silence, together, while the moon poured through the high windows and made their shadows long and joined on the stone floor. In the mirror hall, the third mirror from the left was dark and still and quiet, but deep inside the glass, something stirred and waited. Part 19, The Stag's Farewell. The ancient moon stag stayed for one more week after the coronation, but almost no one knew it. Cale forbade public sightings with the blunt practicality of a border commander. A creature taller than a warhorse, crowned in glowing antlers, and old enough to make pack elders forget how to speak was not allowed to wander through courtyards, markets, or feast halls. It would cause worship, panic, bad paintings, and at least 6 political petitions before breakfast. So the stag remained in the old queen's orchard behind the northern wall, where the apple trees grew too crooked for court gardeners, and the moonlight pooled silver between the roots. Only Aurelia, Cale, Bryn, Ronan, Ivira, and Elda were permitted inside. Everyone else was told the orchard was under cleansing rites. This was technically not a lie. The stag had cleansed 3 baskets of apples from existence within an hour. On the 3rd night, Ronan entered carrying a covered plate. This, he said to the darkness, is not for you. A silver muzzle appeared from behind an apple tree. I said not for you. The plate vanished from his hands with religious speed. Ronan stared at his empty palms. The stag chewed in the shadows, antlers dimmed to a soft glow. That was honey cake, Ronan said. There are laws. Bryn, standing guard at the orchard gate, did not look over. You brought cake into a secret orchard with a sacred thief. That is not a legal defense. The stag swallowed and stepped back into shadow. Aurelia laughed quietly. Cale pretended not to. That was the last theft, or at least the last one anyone could prove. On the final night, the stag came to Aurelia's chamber window after the castle slept. No servants saw it. No pack mirrors lit. No crowd gathered. Only Cale stood behind her in the dark room, one hand resting on the back of her chair, silent as the forest he came from. The stag was too large to enter. It stood outside, its antlers rising above the window frame, glowing softly in the moonlight. Its breath misted in the cold air. Aurelia leaned on the windowsill. You're leaving, she said. The stag dipped its head. A slow, deliberate nod. Thank you, she whispered. For the cliff, the den, the storm, the berries. For coming only when I needed you, and leaving before I could hide behind you. The stag reached its long neck through the window and pressed its muzzle to her forehead. The touch was warm, electric, thrumming with something ancient and kind. Then it pulled back, turned its great body, and walked into the moonlight. Its silver fur glowed brighter with each step. Its antlers blazed once, briefly, and then dimmed again beneath the trees, as if the creature itself understood secrecy. By the time it reached the forest line, it was more suggestion than animal, a shape made of moonbeams and old magic, fading into the dark like a dream that had decided not to be witnessed. It paused at the edge of the trees. It looked back once. Then it was gone. Aurelia stood at the window for a long time, her hand pressed to the spot on her forehead where the stag's muzzle had been, feeling the warmth linger. Cale came to stand beside her. He did not say he was sorry or offer false comfort. He simply looked out at the moonlit forest where the stag had vanished. It ate Ronan's cake, he said. I know. He looked betrayed. He recovered. He threatened to sue the moon. The moon will survive. A pause. I'll miss it, Cale admitted. She looked at him. You liked it. It understood boundaries. It stole food. Privately. Aurelia laughed. They stood at the window, side by side, and watched the moon. Epilogue: The Queen and Her Wolves. 6 months after the coronation, on a night when the moon was full and the kingdom was at peace, Aurelia held a feast. Not a formal banquet, not a court dinner. A feast, the wild kind, with a bonfire in the courtyard and elk on spits and bone flutes playing, badly, and wolves in both forms sprawling across the flagstones, full and warm and content. The border packs came. The wild packs came. Even the far northern ice packs sent delegates, including the grizzled old wolf woman, who sat by the fire, ate 4 plates of elk, and told Ivira stories about ancient wolves until the girl's eyes were the size of moons. Bryn stood guard on the battlements, but she was smiling, a rare sight noted by several witnesses. Ronan sat in the center of the courtyard, surrounded by an audience of pups and young wolves, telling a wildly embellished story about how he had personally defeated Kaelin's entire black guard with nothing but a fishing rod and superior charm. The pups believed every word. The adults did not, but they laughed anyway. Serafina was there. She stood at the edge of the firelight, wearing the plain linen of a healing ward attendant, her dark auburn hair pulled back in a simple braid. She looked different, thinner, quieter, with calluses on her hands from 6 months of real work. She did not approach Aurelia. But when Aurelia caught her eye across the fire, Serafina inclined her head, a small, genuine bow. Not submission. Acknowledgement. Aurelia inclined hers back. It was enough. And Kale, the wolf king of the wilds, the queen's wolf, the man who had watched a barefoot woman climb a cliff and decided he would never let her out of his sight, sat beside Aurelia on the courtyard bench, his arm along the back of the stone behind her, his shoulder touching hers. He was not holding her hand. Not publicly. His expression was neutral, his posture casual, his eyes scanning the crowd with the habitual vigilance of a man who guarded what he loved. But his thumb, hidden behind the bench, was tracing slow circles on the bare skin of her shoulder where her gown left it uncovered. Aurelia turned her head slightly. "You're touching me," she murmured. "I'm resting my hand. On my skin. It's a convenient surface. In a crowded courtyard. I'm multitasking. Kale. You're jealous." His thumb stopped. "Of what?" "The northern delegate. He's been staring at me since dinner." Kale's eyes moved slowly, deliberately, to the northern delegate, a tall, silver-haired wolf with sharp features and an admiring gaze fixed on Aurelia. "He's staring at the crown," Kale said. "He's staring at my neckline. The crown is near the neckline." "Kale, I'm conducting royal security. You're jealous." "I am not. Your wolf just growled." He's clearing his throat. Wolves don't have throats to clear. Kale was silent for a moment. Then his arm moved from the back of the bench to her shoulders, settling around her with a weight that was not possessive but was certainly, unmistakably present. "The delegate," Kale said calmly, "will notice on his own." "Notice what?" "That the queen is not available for staring." "I thought you weren't jealous." "I lied." She laughed, leaned into his shoulder. His arm tightened. The fire crackled. The wolves howled. The moon shone bright and full and warm, and the kingdom, for the first time in years, felt like it was breathing. Far below the castle, in the dark archives, in the room where the cracked central mirror had been stored after its repair, a faint silver light pulsed once. Just once. And in the deepest layer of the glass, where reflection met shadow met the space between worlds, 2 silver-gray eyes opened. They looked up, through stone and stair and moonlit courtyard, through fire and laughter and the golden head of the woman on the bench with another man's arm around her. They watched. Patient. Unblinking. Unchanging. This is not over. The eyes closed. The mirror went dark. And above, in the moonlight, the queen's wolf pressed his nose to her palm, and her fingers curled gently into the fur behind his ear, and neither of them looked away from the fire. Follow Moonlit Romance Library.